Welcome to the Be the Change podcast with your host, Ralph Harper. On this podcast, he shares his vision for the future of the United States. Think of this podcast as somewhat of a roadmap to times in the future on a continuum from a dark past to the 2060s. Yep, that's right. He's a forward thinker whose purpose is to dictate positive outcomes for our children and our country versus leaving it all to chance. Ralph will cover parenting, fatherhood, accountability, and what it takes to win in this great nation. It's not just Ralph. He will have difficult conversations with other thought leaders of different backgrounds and political affiliations. It's time to get started. Here's your host, Ralph Harper.
This week, I'd like to put hope in perspective. In order for me to do that, I'd like to share with you some of my personal experiences that make me hopeful about the United States of America. I can say that I honestly believe that for most of my life, I questioned the value of hoping. I simply viewed hope as a wishful thought, something that if you thought about, that you wanted, maybe it could happen, or it may not happen. I didn't see any value in that at all. I never understood why Jesse Jackson actually coined the phrase, keep hope alive. I didn't quite understand why Al Sharpton touts hope as a value proposition. President Barack Obama actually wrote an entire book titled The Audacity of Hope. So at some point, I started to realize there must be some level of value tethered to hope. So one day I decided to go to dictionary.com, look up the word hope, and to read the definition, and to do what I could to put hope in perspective. I did that in a biased way. I really wanted there to be something that I was able to glean that would cause me to believe that there was value in hoping. So after reading the definition from dictionary.com, something actually clicked. Now, I don't want any of you to think that I have never known the definition of hope. I needed to read the definition again so that I could get something of value from it. And that particular experience just meant something to me. Dictionary.com defines hope as the feeling that what is wanted can be had. Let me say that again. The feeling that what is wanted can be had. So after pondering this simple definition of hope in my head for a few minutes or so, I came up with my own personal interpretation of what hope is. I believe that hope is a belief in possibilities. And by me putting hope into that context, I was immediately able to better appreciate hope. In addition, within that moment, it seemed, I was able to recall feelings of hopelessness from a dark past, experiences that I witnessed as a child and over the course of my life in Birmingham, Alabama, and in other places around the country. That feeling of hopelessness, which is very much so the opposite of hope. Hopelessness has to do with the notion that you don't believe that things are possible for you for whatever reason. It is very important for me to make these two distinctions because that is the best way, I believe, for us to have full appreciation for what hope is. When you're hopeless, it is almost impossible for you to be inspired to do something to make that thing happen that you want to happen. when you believe that whatever you do or how well you do it, the outcome you desire will not happen for you, there's a good chance you will stop putting in the work to make that thing happen or to make that outcome that you desire come to fruition. The person who does not believe he or she can be successful getting the funding they need to start a business will not perceive any value in filling out the application. The person who aspires to be president of the United States of America but believes it's not possible for her will more than likely not entertain the notion of running a campaign. The man who believes that woman is just too beautiful for him and that there's no way he will ever be able to talk to her or marry her will irresponsibly fall short of simply introducing himself. On the other hand, the person who is hopeful and that person who believes in possibilities will also appreciate the fact that there is accountability attached to hope. That was my epiphany I had back then when I made that conscious choice to go back and go to the dictionary and revisit the definition of hope. There's accountability attached to it. So you have to do something. In this regard, hope is profoundly powerful because it serves as the foundational basis for accountability, taking action, doing something. But hope is not just about individuals or individual hope or individual accountability. Hope is also about bigger picture things related to values and norms and places and people and our country and the world. You can be hopeful about all of those things as long as someone is being accountable. And it's so in that regard, it's not always the individual that has to be accountable. You can be hopeful about other people's accountability. And when I think about that, I think about notions of just witnessing people and their actions and what they do. Because sometimes when you look at people's actions and you look at other things that happen around you, then it's easy to appreciate the fact that, wow, that's hopeful. And that thing that I've desired that may fall way outside of my realm is actually possible. I have a couple of experiences like that where I've had just encounters with people, and they have shown me these very hopeful signs. And I think I'd like to share some of that with you. In the afternoon of January 20th, 2009, I was home with a couple of friends I had invited over. One friend was a very dear friend of mine. His name is Rodney Norman. Rodney Norman used to work with me while I was at PepsiCo, and he was still working at PepsiCo at the time. And the other friend was a close neighbor, a really good friend of mine. His name is March Davenport. The three of us had taken the day off for the sole purpose of witnessing Barack Obama inaugurated as the first African American or Black American president of the United States of America. So as we watched the full ceremony, at one point, the three of us were locked with our shoulders, the arms around each other's shoulders. And I know for sure at least one or two tears fell from each of these grown men's eyes, including mine, to witness what our country had done. And it really was about what our country had done, because Barack Obama did not become president of the United States on his own. So for me, the thing that was most intriguing about that, which kind of gave me a very hopeful sign, was the fact that over 69 million citizens of the United States of America voted in the affirmative to elect Mr. Barack Obama as President of the United States. This experience was particularly exciting for me because it served as proof that our entire country is not completely polarized. It's just not. And the reality is that the majority of those 69 million citizens of the United States who voted for President Barack Obama were more than likely white. I am quite sure the majority of them were white citizens of our country. I make that point because it's so easy to get caught up with some of the race relation issues we have in the United States. And it's easy to paint with a broad brush. But this particular example proves that that is not always the case. There's a lot of good in people in our country. And there is good in people of all races in our country. And we have to be aware of that. And because for me, that is the kind of thing that makes me hopeful about our country. Our country is bigger and better than those factions of people who insist on clinging to the ills of slavery that have been passed down for over 150 years since slavery ended. Those people who still want to believe in notions of superiority and those kinds of things. But that is not necessarily what our entire country is about. And that is why, again, this particular experience really makes me hopeful about the future of our country and the possibilities these divides will eventually fade and be completely eradicated. So that was my big picture example of a very clear-cut, hopeful sign. I'm also just very excited by the small things, and you might be shocked by some of the simple things that I get excited about when I see it and experience it in the United States and in my neighborhoods around the country and different places I've been. I remember the time when I was just about to leave Walmart, and I saw this woman walk in. She was a blonde woman, a white woman, and she had 4 kids with her. There was a little kid who was a blonde kid who, from my vantage point and from my perspective, seemed to be her son. But then she had these 3 other kids. There was one kid who appeared to me to be Asian. There was another kid who, again, appeared to me to be Hispanic. And then there was this other kid who was a Black American young boy. The Black American boy had a big afro on his head. It was all over the place. And he was the one who decided to just walk away from the group for a while to go over to get a candy bar or something. I don't know. But the blonde woman responded in a way that was telling. She walked over to the young Black American boy. She gently put her hand on the back of his afro. She leaned down and spoke with him directly in his face and explained to him why he needed to stay with the group. And as they walked away and the kids reconnected, I could tell that the only thing those 4 little children were being taught about race is how to appreciate all flavors of it. And that is what our country should be about. These are the kinds of examples that make me very hopeful about the future of the United States of America. Our country has come a long way, but yet still, I would be remiss not to acknowledge the fact that we have a long way to go. But I'm encouraged. I am mostly encouraged by our children. like the woman I encountered walking out of the Best Buy store, who had her two little girls in her basket as they walked out. And I walked in, and when the woman encountered me, she instructed her children. She says, "Say hello to the gentleman." And in unison, the two little beautiful girls said, "Hello, sir." These little girls had absolutely no idea who I was, but I can tell you one thing. Their mother and those two little white girls, they could care less about the color of my skin. Again, for me, it's the simple things that make me hopeful about our country. These little things may not mean much to you, but they mean the world to me, just watching and experiencing these tiny little things that offer hopeful signs about the future of the United States of America, especially as it relates to race. So when I encountered the young boy at the gym, a white father and son pair, when I reached the door, the young man was standing there with the door held open for me. And I looked down at the little boy and I said, "Thank you, young man." And that young man looked up to me in my eyes and he says, "You're welcome, sir." And as I walked through the door, I could see his father. I could see the look on his eyes through the peripheral vision of my sight. And as I walked away, I saw the father just rub his son on his head and mess his hair up a little bit, just as a way to acknowledge he had done the right thing. Not that he was acknowledging me as a Black American man. He was just being respectful to me as an adult, walking towards the gym, and he opened the door for me to invite me to go in before he did. I'll say it again. These small little things may not mean much to you. They mean a hell of a lot to me. They mean a lot to me because when I was growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, I remember the kids on the back of the truck yelling out to me, "Chocolate chip, chocolate chip, chocolate chip." So my experience with the little boy at the gym is in many ways indicative of change. It's indicative of hope. Another young Black American boy that I met in the process of a very brief encounter, his name is Jackson Turner. And our relationship has grown to a bigger place now because I consider myself a mentor to him and he a protege to me. And I work with him a lot. I'm just talking about some of his projects and some of the things he's trying to do. When I met Jackson, Jackson was actually selling lemonade on a Saturday, on a hot summer day last summer. He was selling lemonade. And when I asked him, "Well, what are you doing? Why are you selling the lemonade?" He started to tell me what he was doing and why he was doing it. But he was interrupted by his mom. His mother started to tell me about Jackson. And Jackson turned around and he stomped his foot and he looked up at his mother and he yelled at her. He said, "Mom, let me tell him." And so his mother gave in and simply walked away and let Jackson tell me about what he was doing. Jackson told me he was raising money to buy school supplies for other kids at his school who could not afford to buy school supplies. And intrigued by the whole thing, the whole experience of him explaining to me why he was doing that, I asked him, I was like, "Why are you doing that?" He says, "Well, because it makes me sad to see kids coming to school on the first day and they don't have school supplies. And I know that because they don't have school supplies, it will be hard for them to keep up and catch up." Now, this is a young man who I know is going somewhere. And as the old folks in Birmingham, Alabama would say, he's going to be somebody one day. Since I met Jackson this past summer, Jackson has raised tens of thousands of dollars, and I have witnessed him spend that money on other kids who are less fortunate than he is. Now, while I have worked with Jackson and my nonprofit organization, Catherine Harper for Keepers, CH4K, has made some donations to Jackson's cause. Our number represents a microcosm of the funds that he has received from other major corporations and other individuals, including mayors around our community. It is uncanny. It is really uncanny, the stuff that I see Jackson doing. I am so proud of this young man. He represents one of my absolute best examples of a young man who gets it and appreciates the notion of duty and doing something for other people. Needless to say, Jackson contributes to enhancing my hope for our entire country. Moreover, I am quite sure Jackson is making his mother proud. I know with absolute certainty, because I have witnessed the tears with many of his accomplishments. I have to give his mother a lot of credit because she is the one who drives him and supports him in all of his endeavors. And it is a beautiful thing to watch and experience. Another significant hope indicator for me is the group of students from Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. This is the group of kids who organized the March for Our Lives protest in Washington, D.C. and other cities around the country. They were successful pulling all of this together in less than 5 days, I understand, which of itself is very impressive. Emma Gonzalez, age 18, and David Hogue, age 27, are just two of the leaders of this amazing group of people. This group of mostly young teenagers were protesting gun violence in the United States after a massive shooting at their school. It was one of the most compelling displays of diverse unity that I have seen in the United States in a long time. In fact, Martin Luther King's granddaughter, Yolanda Renee King, just 9 years old, on the stage and speaking to over 200,000 people who participated in that particular march, pronounced, "Enough is enough." Then I was completely awe-stricken by a young girl, just 11 years old. Her name was Naomi Wadler. Again, as I have suggested before, this young lady, this young 11-year-old girl, is going to be somebody someday. Naomi was there on stage with her sassy hair and her beautiful scarf whipped around her neck and her shoulders. And while speaking on that world stage, Naomi made her purpose clear. She was there to speak up for other young Black American girls who are murdered but never get the attention they deserve. Naomi said, and I quote, "These stories don't make the front page of the national newspapers." Naomi continued, "These stories don't lead on the evening news." With force in her voice, Naomi said, "I'm here to say never again for those girls too." Then at one point, Naomi seemed to challenge those adults in the room who may have questioned her attendance at that rally. She said, "They think I'm too young to have these thoughts. They think I'm a tool of some nameless adult." And as the crowd screamed and applauded her, Naomi was poised as she paused before she said, "It's not true." Then Naomi decided to close her speech out by standing taller and looking to the audience to remind them that, yes, she's only 11 years old. But then she also reminded them that she has just 7 short years before she and her friends will be able to vote too. The whole experience was so powerful that it sent shockwaves through my body. This is one of my pet peeves because I really don't understand why it is that people in the United States of America refuse to vote. And there she was, this young, vibrant little 11-year-old girl, eager to vote, but too young to vote, patiently waiting her turn so that she can exercise that God-given right she has to vote, because she knows that is her only voice when it comes to laws and legislation in the United States of America. That is every citizen's vote and their voice. And this 11-year-old girl gets it, and there are grown men and women who simply don't get it. Imagine the irony of that. Then think about the people who gave their lives for that very right to vote. And then ask, why don't people exercise that right? But this is one of my pet peeves, and this is one of the things I'm hopeful about. And this is one of the reasons I decided to feature someone like Naomi, who is putting that word out that voting in the United States of America is important. I tell you, I am so intrigued by the children of the United States of America. They are the ones who make me hopeful, because as I've said on previous podcasts, and I've written a lot about this in my book, I really don't think a lot of grown-ups understand that our children are the ones who will grow up to be adults and who will be running things in the next 45 to 50 years. That's why it's so important for us to groom them the right way, because it's one thing to be hopeful, but when you are proactively accountable by guiding your children the right way, then you can all but assure things will work out just fine in the future. It is so intuitive. It just makes fundamental sense to me that when we guide our children the right way, then they are the ones who will grow up to be adults, and they are the ones who will set the policies and make the change that needs to happen. They are the ones who will be the change. We just have to instill the right values in them. And I can tell you, I don't know Naomi's mother. I don't know Naomi's father. I'd like to meet them someday. But I can say to you unequivocally, those parents have instilled some profound values in that child. And I know she's not the only one, because I know my friend Jackson has some pretty heavy values instilled in him as well. And I know that there are thousands of kids around the United States, thousands of kids, and they are of different races, different backgrounds, but they are set and ready to go. We just have to figure out who those are who still need a little push and do our part to get them what they need as well, so that they will turn out to be on point and doing their part to establish the United States based on the same set of values that were intended by our forefathers. So let me close by suggesting that hope is a very powerful attribute to have. And quite honestly, I believe that if you don't have hope, then it may be an indication that you are experiencing hopelessness. It's hard for me to imagine there's something in between the two. I guess there is, but I have to be honest, I don't have a way of articulating what that is. What I do know is that I have experienced both hope and hopelessness. And I fundamentally believe that hopelessness is worse. The notion that a person does not believe that whatever they do, the possibility is not there for them to achieve whatever it is they desire to achieve. That is a helpless place to be in. when you do not believe that anything you do, whatever it might be, will not yield a certain outcome that you desire to yield, it forces you in a place where you're not willing to do anything towards that thing you are looking to do. It forces you in that place of just being a capitulator, or a person who's just willing to give up, a person who's willing to stop trying, a person who lacks accountability. You see, I witnessed hopelessness in the South. I witnessed grown men and grown women willing to give up. In a lot of ways, they had legitimate reasons to, because there were actual laws in place that prevented them from being successful in the South. It is shocking to think back on those days and to just acknowledge that reality. But those days are gone. There is absolutely no need for anyone in this country, regardless of who you are, to be hopeless. You just have to ask the question of yourself: what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do? Now, I tell you, I think I want to make this next week my topic. The question of what you're willing to do, because I believe this. In this day and time, there are simply two things required to be successful in the United States of America. The first is the question I just asked: what are you willing to do? And the second is another question: where are you willing to do it? I think it's very important to conflate these two very important accountabilities. What are you willing to do? Where are you willing to do it? The reason I throw the geography into the equation is because when you consider different cities around the country, there are certain cities with limited opportunities, if you will. There are certain cities with race relation concerns and so on. And then there are other cities that are more inviting. There are other cities with a much broader span of opportunity to be successful. So when you land in the right place and you're willing to do the right thing, then your chance of your hopeful thoughts coming to fruition might be enhanced by knowing you are ready to go do something, and you're willing to go do it in a place that might be more accepting of you being in that place to do it. And the opportunities may be greater in those places. So I don't want to steal my own thunder, because I really do believe that next week is a good time to follow up on the accountability that is inextricably attached to the hope that individuals may have in their heart. And while I know many of you may be equipped with the will to go make something happen, it really does matter where you make a conscious choice to execute your plan. Thank you so much for joining Be the Change podcast. Thanks so much, and God bless.
Thank you for joining us on Be the Change. Be sure to subscribe today, and don't forget to rate and review so we can continue to bring you the best conversations. Visit ralphharper.com for show notes, resources, and events. To support Be the Change, please join our patron community at patreon.com/Ralph Harper. Be the Change returns the same time next week and is brought to you by the 2060s Project.